And thank you for joining us for fourth international webinar organized by Faculty of Economics, Business and Tourism, University of Split, and supported by Croatian section of European Regional Science Association. Being developed in response to the changing needs, this webinar should represent an essential guide to understanding the key facts and offer a chance to ask questions, learn what others are doing, and gain advice how to make the best decision for our local and regional community. Keeping in mind our goals, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Professor João Romão, Associate Professor at the Department of International Tourism and Business of Yasuda Women University, Hiroshima, Japan. His research interests and consultancy experience is in tourism, urban planning, region development, and spatial econometrics. He is founding member of the Regional Sciences Academy, a co-chair of the cluster on tourism, leisure, and recreation within the network on European communication and transport activities research. Finally, João is our dear friend, and therefore it gives me great privilege to announce his speech today under the title Tourism, Smart Specialization, Growth, and Resilience. Before we start, a few technical and organizational tips. We will start with 30 minutes presentation, and after we will have up to 30 minutes for question and answer session. Please, just to be on safe side, mute your microphone during the presentation. If you need advice, you have in left corner your icon for the microphone, so that we can have stable and smooth link with our speaker. After the presentation, you will be kindly asked to turn on your microphone and start with the discussion. Thank you, and João, the online stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Vinko. Thank you for the invitation. Always nice to be back in Split, although it's not exactly back. But as you said, I'm now working in Japan, but this work corresponds to the final stage of a research project that I was developing in Portugal. So I can explain a bit what was this. I will explain the motivation, what is the conceptual framework I used to this study, the data, the variables, and then I use, let's say, two different models. One model to analyze the impacts of tourism and so to say territorial capital or characteristics of the regional characteristics of the regions on economic growth, and then a second model, or in fact a second group of models to analyze the impact of tourism and some territorial characteristics on regional resilience. And I will explain a bit what are the different types of resilience that I try to measure. Then I will show the conclusions and mostly further developments, because all these, as you will see, can be developed in many directions. So I think one of the possibilities of this work is also opening some new ideas for new developments. So I will try to be a bit quick on this. So basically, we assume that I assume that tourism comprises the contributions of different types of sectors and can be different in different regions. Sometimes more linked to food production, sometimes more linked to cultural activities, sometimes more linked to nature. So there are links with different sectors, and that means that there are different possibilities to be framed within the smart specialization strategies. So here I try to model different types of relatedness, different types of connections between tourism and other sectors, with, of course, some limitations in terms of how to model this. So basically, I try to assess, try to measure the impact of tourism dynamics, and this is measured by tourism demand and tourism specialization in each region. Then I I tried to include in the model the linkages between tourism and other activities through the identification of the sectorial priorities defined by each region in the smart specialization strategies, and then other regional characteristics related to capital, labor, and technology. So this is basically what I try to put in the model, in the models, and this is the kind of visual representation of the two types of models that are here in this work. So I'm working with the NUTS2 regions because it's the level at which most of the regional innovation strategies are defined. In fact, not for all the regions, but in most of the cases, the smart specialization strategies are defined at this level. And also it's a good level in terms of availability of information for these variables that I'm trying to use. Then I'm focusing exclusively on regions where tourism or hospitality are one of the priority sectors. This is to reduce a bit the possibility of interconnections between sectors would become too much if I consider all the regions. So this is only for the regions where tourism is defined as one of the priority strategic choices of the region. So that means that I didn't consider regions where the smart specialization strategies were defined at different territorial levels, like the Dutch regions. It was not NUTS2. Some places, at least I only found information for a national level, like Slovenia or Scotland. Then there are regions where there are lots of missing information about the other variables that I would like to include in the model. And then there are also regions where tourism we know that it's important, like the cities of Madrid and Berlin, but they didn't define tourism as one of the strategic priorities. So I didn't include also in the model. One question that, for example, can be analyzed with more detail in future studies. In this case, I just define the strategic priorities with a dummy variable. So if I find 13 sectors, I think, if the region shows that sector, it's 1. If it didn't show, it's 0. So this represents first 0, 1 doesn't measure the economic importance, or if the sector performed well or not, or didn't perform well. Doesn't measure anything like that. Just measures yes or no was defined as a priority. It also doesn't assess if that choice makes sense or doesn't make sense. For example, just to give an example that I know well, Algarve, the region where my university is located and my hometown, they identified the health sector as one of the priorities. And as you probably are familiar, one of the characteristics of these priorities should be that the region should focus on sectors in which they are already relatively strong. They have already some good capabilities. And I found very strange because health sector is not exactly a sector that we can consider strong in Portugal. And in fact, I had a look at one of the indicators that could somehow measure the capacity of the region. For example, the number of beds in hospitals per 1,000 inhabitants. The highest number that I found in the Eurostat database is 1,283. The average of the European Union is 509. Algarve has 250, so it's much below Portugal. It's less than half of the average of the European Union. And in fact, among 225 regions with that information available, only 17 were worse than Algarve. And by the way, from these 17, most of them are in Denmark and Sweden. So I suppose they have a different system to organize the hospital beds or to count. But in fact, Algarve is one of the worst regions in terms of health services. And we know that, the persons who have their families there or the persons who live there. So in my opinion, it's not the best idea to put a sector like this as a priority in a region like Algarve. So this model doesn't deal with this kind of the choices are good or the choices are not good. I just accept the choice was done or not done. So I don't evaluate if it was a good idea or not. So this somehow represents what is the smart specialization, mostly for people who are not so familiar with this, which is not your case for sure. So a limited number of sectors, some key enabling technologies, ICT, as potential tools to stimulate the interactions and to boost the networks among regional actors in order to, through processes of bottom-up processes of entrepreneurial discovery, as they define, reach some markets and or societal changes. So this is basically the idea, a limited number of sectors. So from the point of view of this model, I just focus on the sectors themselves. So what are the regions? Considering those restrictions that I mentioned before, there are, I found 55 regions. And in fact, except those on the column on the left side, which are 3 in Denmark, 2 in Germany, 2 in Austria, and 2 in Romania, all the others are in the south part of Europe: Greece, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Cyprus, and Malta. So it's a certain concentration in the south. Also, as the period is relatively long, 11 years, 2007 to 2017, it's possible to somehow to identify 3 stages. One stage, 2007-2008, that we can consider a stage of growth. You can see that the growth rates were still positive. Then we have the impact of the international crisis. The average growth rate during this period, starting in 2009 until 2013, is negative or very close to 0. And then we can consider that there is a recovery after 2014 with positive growth rates again. It's also, by the way, another possible improvement of this model, a more sophisticated analysis of this information, if we can somehow separate per region this pattern. Because, for example, it's very obvious that Greek regions suffer the impacts of the crisis much before the German regions, for example. So this succession of phases, expansion, recession, recovery, is not simultaneous in all the regions. But well, I'm working here with the average growth rate observed for these 55 regions. So this is the map, and this is the average growth observed during the full period. The darker colors represent higher levels of economic growth. And as you can easily see, Denmark and Germany are performing much better than Greece, Italy, south of Spain, Portugal a bit in the middle. But the differences are already relatively clear in this model. So what kind of variables I used? So for the model to estimate the impacts on growth, I used the growth of gross value added per habitant, considering purchasing power standards. And for the resilience models, I use the employment rate, assuming that the most, as some other studies, the most important way to analyze is to see how these economic crises impact the living conditions of the population. And in that sense, employment can be better variable to indicate how much the population is feeling the in this case negative impacts of the crisis. Then to assess tourism dynamics, I have tourism demand, just the number of overnight stays per habitant, level of specialization in tourism measured in two different ways, one by the percentage of tourism in the employment, and another by the percentage of tourism in the regional gross value added. For the capital, as some authors use this type of variable, the gross value added of the region in the previous year. It's also a variable that allows us to identify processes of convergence or divergence between the most and the less developed countries. And for labor and technology, for labor, I use the percentage of the population in tertiary education, which, by the way, I found not tremendously useful. And for technology, the percentage of R&D expenses. So, of course, many other variables can be used to characterize the regional conditions for growth, enabling conditions for growth. I try to concentrate in a few that are more or less consensual, also to make possible to have some interpretation. Then I identified 13 sectors that were selected by these regions, and you have also for each sector the number of regions that selected the sector concerned. For example, agriculture and food, the sector 1 was selected by 42 regions, energy services by 27 regions, and so on. So, and these are dummy variables, so 0, 1, 0 if not selected, 1 if selected. So the first model, after doing some tests for multicollinearity, stationarity, Hausmann tests, I use the fixed effects model. I also calculated the pooling effects. I don't have the results here because you will see that there is already a lot of model. But you can trust me that the results are extremely similar. All these variables have high statistical significance, so they are relevant in terms of explanatory power. However, the R-square is relatively low. It's low. That means that although the average tendency is relevant, each region can be all the regions can have a relatively strong variation regarding this average tendency. So main ideas about these questions of growth: a negative correlation with gross value added in the previous year, meaning that less developed regions are growing faster. So meaning that there is a convergence, a process of convergence between regions. So the less developed approaching to the most developed. A positive correlation between economic growth and growth value added in tourism and tourism demand. So tourism demand can be seen as a source of economic growth. However, there is a negative correlation when we measure specialization in tourism through the share of regional employment. So that suggests that the regions where tourism services are mostly based on labor-intensive services don't have the same type of positive impacts of tourism on growth. And these results, by the way, are very similar to a previous work I had done with our colleague and friend Peter Nijkamp. For a different group of regions at that time, we were observing a different period. It was also starting in 2007, but I think finishing 2013 or 14. But mostly we were looking at a much broader set of regions. It was, I think, more than 200 regions. So it was a different group. This is only for regions with a strict focus on tourism. The previous work was for all types of regions, so to say. Wherever we had data, we put everything in the model, but still the results for these variables were very similar. In this case, we observed also that agriculture and food and health services as priority services where those were a positive correlation with economic growth was found. Again, remembering that this general tendency is statistically relevant, but maybe there are strong variations between regions around this general tendency. Sorry, a bit of water, I'm speaking too much. If you want, I'm not sure if it's allowed, but for me, it's very welcome to have some questions. Sorry. So for resilience, I have in fact 3 models, because apart from these 2, I have another one that tries to assess vulnerability. And this is basically inspired by a paper by Martin, Sandley, Gardiner, and Tyler. I should have maybe, I can send if someone wants to check, I can send the full reference. But basically, I tried to look at 2 different types of resilience. One of these types refers to how to recover or how to come back to the initial stage of growth. And in that case, I compare the employment after the crisis, so the employment in each region from 2014 to 2017, so after the crisis. I compare it with the level before crisis, with the level that existed in 2007, 2008. So how much they came back to the situation that they were before the crisis. And the second type, the shock absorption, I also compare the employment in 2014, 2017, but in this case with the period of the crisis itself. So how much the region reacted after the external shock. I think the results are somehow interesting, but this can be done in a different way also in terms of future. For further research, we can have a look eventually at the self-restoration as the first reaction after the crisis, and shock absorption, the shock absorption as the first reaction immediately after the crisis, and self-restoration as a period after that, for example, 2017 to 2020 or something like that. In this case, as the period was relatively short, I looked at the same moment of recovery and I compared with different situations before. And in fact, it gives different results. Then again, I did the statistical tests. And again, I show the results without the non-relevant variables. So in this case, I'm showing the first model. So comparing with the expansion period, with the period before the crisis, on this column in the center, so to say, and then the column on the right side shows the shock absorption, so the reaction after comparing with the period of the crisis. As you see, there are many variables that are statistically relevant, and also the R-square increased significantly. So in this case, we can say that the variables the regions tend to have more consistent or more a behavior that is more concentrated around the general tendency. Some important differences here. For example, in this case, there was a positive correlation with the level of gross value added in the previous year. So it shows if in the previous growth model, the less developed regions were growing faster, but in this case, we see that the most developed regions are more resilient. So they recover better in both types of resilience that I'm observing. Also, it was observed that there is a negative correlation with investments in R&D. So the regions with higher efforts on innovation are less resilient. And this is maybe related with the previous information, because probably the regions that are investing more are those with lower levels, are those that are less developed. So they are investing more. And as it was seen, these less developed are also less resilient. So there is a chain here that somehow can justify this negative relation. Also, it was observed that the impact of tourism on resilience is only observed when we look at the share of tourism in the gross value added. So tourism demand or employment in tourism doesn't have a significant impact. Only when we look at the gross value added by tourism, we observe this impact on resilience. So these effects are observed for the two types of resilience. If we look at only at the self-restoration, so when we compare with the period before the crisis, in this case we find a positive impact of tourism demand. So tourism demand helped after the crisis to reach the levels before crisis, but again, labor-intensive tourism services do not help. In terms of smart specialization, I'm not sure if we can exactly make a very detailed interpretation of these types of all these impacts, sectorial impacts. I would say that I would keep the idea that there are many possibilities to achieve positive results combining tourism with different types of sectors. So there is no specific, there is not one solution that we can say it's better. There are many solutions that can lead to positive results, which is somehow confirming a bit the idea of smart specialization, that each region should focus on its own history, its own strengths, its own capabilities. And in fact, there are many options that seem to be effective when combined with tourism, because in this case, I remember that we are only looking at regions where tourism is one of the main priorities. So we are always looking at combinations with tourism. And I would keep the idea that there are different types of solutions: mobility and transport, culture and creativity, technologies of the sea, biotechnologies, advanced materials, so different types of positive impacts that can be observed. In the self-restoration, I found the negative impact of logistics that honestly speaking, I have no idea how to interpret this result. But in the shock absorption, the negative impact of housing and construction is somehow something that I observed before when I made a specific study about Algarve and the reaction of the regional economy after the crisis. So tourism had a strong decline suddenly in Algarve. Tourism recovered, but the economy didn't recover. The employment didn't recover, and that was because there was a very close connection between the evolution of the tourism sector and the construction sector. So although tourism recovered, the construction sector didn't. And that probably is what justifies also this negative impact of the construction sector in the capacity of the regions to absorb this negative shock. Probably the construction sector was affected for a longer period during this crisis. One last model is vulnerability. So how much a region is protected or not protected against these crises. And in this case, I compare the employment rate in the period 2009-2013, so during the moment of the crisis, with the moment before, with the period of growth, 2007-2008. Why didn't I include the smart specialization sectors here? Because the strategies for smart specialization were defined in 2014. And even if we assume that the choices of the main sectors should be somehow related to a certain history of the region, I think it should be a bit abusive to say that to include these variables here once the choice was made for 2014 and this analysis finishes in 2013. So in this case, I look at the same variables but without the smart specialization sectors. Also, again, most developed regions less vulnerable. High specialization in tourism without value added, without high importance of value added, increases the vulnerability. So again, negative correlation of the share of tourism within regional employment. Again, the value added in tourism is something that gives a positive contribution to reduce the vulnerability. Again, some variables that I don't have a very obvious interpretation, regions where labor force is more qualified and more vulnerable. That's why I think there is also some work to do in terms of how to measure the characteristics of the labor force or the characteristics of the qualifications of the population in each region. So, too much models, too much results, these without looking at the magnitude of each parameter, but this table gives the sign for the statistically relevant impacts observed by for each variable in each type of model. So we have from the left the model with the impacts on growth, then the impact on vulnerability, then the shock absorption and the recovery. And as we can see for the tourism, employment in tourism has in general a negative impact. So a region that has a very high percentage of the population working in tourism by itself, it has a negative impact in everything. But if we measure specialization by the importance of tourism in the gross value added, in that case, we have a positive impact. Tourism demand can have sometimes, other times it's not statistically relevant. R&D expenses being negative and also education being negative, the only effects that are observed are negative. It's eventually for the R&D, I can suppose that it can be related to the higher investments done by the less developed regions to try to catch up. And as we saw, the less developed regions have more problems in terms of resilience. So that's eventually an explanation. For the education, I don't find a proper explanation. And then we also see that many sectors can have, mostly on the resilient part, many sectors can give positive contributions, which somehow suggests that different types of relatedness and different types of proximity can be explored to achieve good results. So I think this is also something that can be explored in the future, how to measure more precisely these connections. So somehow this slide is saying the things that I was mentioning before. So basically, for the focus on tourism, that was the core of my analysis, what I've been studying these years. So specialization in tourism measured by employment has negative impacts on resilience, increases vulnerability. Specialization in tourism measured by value added has positive impacts on resilience and reduces vulnerability. Smart specialization, different types of impacts on growth and resilience. Mobility and transports, for example, that is very much directly related with tourism, but also manufacture that is not necessarily related with tourism. So this suggests that there is room for different types of strategic approaches to the production of knowledge and to the development of innovation networks in the region. Different types of studies that can be done. One very obvious, the smart specialization strategies finish this year, 2020. Normally, the programs of investment related to these strategies have a period, at least 2 years, eventually 3 years, that they can finish these investments. So in fact, the strategies will finish 2022, 2023. There is a cushion of the plans. And of course, the impacts of the strategy will take even more time. So let's say that this analysis is very, very preliminary. It's the middle of the process. The impacts are not there. So updating this type of analysis can, of course, give a more precise picture in the future. We can also compare this performance of the regions where tourism is one of the priorities with other regions where tourism is not a priority and see what is different, what is the same. We can specify these smart specialization priorities in a different way, maybe economic variables, the economic importance of each sector, the exports of each sector. In this case, it was a very simple option, 0-1, but we can instead try to include other forms of measuring the economic importance of each sector, how it evolved during the period. It's not easy. I thought a bit about it. It's not easy. For example, a region can choose a sector that is very big, but this doesn't grow too much during the period. So if you only look at the volume, then the growth is small. Was it a good performance or not a good performance? On the other hand, for example, construction and real estate activities, mostly for the region where the regions where tourism is important. Nobody says that real estate activities is a strategic priority. However, it's often a very important sector in terms of volume. So there are many tricky things how to assess economically these smart specialization priorities. Also, I'll just look at the sectors, but each region also defines technologies, so we can try to include also technology in the picture. Territorial characteristics, as I mentioned, I was not too happy with the results for education. Maybe other type of variables can measure. For technology, I used the very simple indicator of the investments in R&D. We can go into patents, but for tourism it's a bit difficult, the patent analysis, because there is not so many things that are specifically of tourism. And on the other hand, there are a lot of other technologies related to transportation, utilization of energy that can be used by tourism as a form of innovation in facility management, etc. That are not strictly of that. They're not specific of that sector, so it's not easy also. And also tourism dynamics can be assessed in a different way. For example, the markets, if the region is very much dependent on the tourism coming from tourists coming from a country that was very much affected by the crisis, or coming from another country that was not affected by the crisis, this kind of things. Which will be, by the way, very relevant now when we look at the recovery after these epidemic crisis, so to say. For sure, the regions that are depending on tourists coming from countries very much affected by this coronavirus probably will suffer more than regions that are more dependent on countries that are not so much affected. So there are different types of specification, of possible specification for almost everything that I used in this model. Coming a bit later also can help to have a better picture. So I think this opens there is a very wide field open for the analysis of these smart specialization strategies that we have now, I think the fact that the information is somehow centralized and we have a certain standard for the definition of the policies at European level, we can compare a bit more easily. I think it opens some opportunities to study a bit better the effective results of these regional innovation strategies. This is just a first contribution. I think there is a lot of work to be done in the future. And well, thank you for the patience. And meanwhile, hello, Lydia, Smiliana, and friends who appeared during the process.
Thank you, João, on the remarkable presentation. Now I will ask my colleagues to take an opportunity and ask the questions. So please. Maybe I can start with one question, João.
Okay.
What do you think about the spatial dependence? Do you find it interesting or relevant for this kind of issues?
In that study that I mentioned, done with Peter Nijkamp, we included, although Peter Nijkamp is not one of the biggest fans of spatial econometrics, I wrote the paper before speaking to him, so he just entered in the final stage to give his precise comments, but he could not say that the model was not good. But in that case, we were looking at, I think, 210 regions or something. So the regions were contiguous. So we could somehow model this. If you look at the map here, representing the regions, they are very far. They are too far. Some of them are connected, but at least the econometric models based on geographical distance would not work. The regions on Denmark and then these regions in the south of Greece, everything is too much disconnected. We could eventually try to measure economic proximity or knowledge proximity through relations of import-export between regions and these kind of things. But that would be a much more complex model. In this case, I tend to think that there is always some spatial dependence, but it was not possible to include in this model. It's again an interesting development eventually, but I think it must be more concentrated. With so much sparse distribution of the regions, it's very difficult to model, I think.
Thank you.
May I, Vinko?
Of course.
Hi, João. It is so nice to see you again.
Hello.
Hello, Lydia is here. So it is nice to have you at least on the screen. So hopefully not for long, you will come again here.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. So maybe I would like to pose a question. You have said that the growth of demand doesn't show to have much of an impact on resilience on the regions under your research. So have these been the expected results? Do you find any logic behind this? And okay, you said, of course, that what you put in the model actually affects also the results. But it was very interesting to me that health sector and agriculture and food gross value added have been in high correlation with tourism. So can you also give some more additional explanations on the logic behind these results?
For this, I think, I would say that for the sectors, honestly speaking, I don't have much more than intuition. So, I mean, there is nothing in the model explaining how this transmission is done. Mm-hmm. So I can identify, well, the model says yes or the model says no, but how the transmission is done, the model doesn't show. And this maybe Ron Boschma is working a bit on these processes of transmission. Maybe we can explore some ideas of him in the future. It's another work that can be done. But I would say that it was it was positive to find that agriculture and food in food production are something interesting because we tend to sometimes forget the importance of that in our contemporary societies. Agriculture tends to be somehow neglected, and finding that there is a positive relation and a positive impact both on growth and also shock absorption can be, I think, interesting. Also, again, with this corona issue, the need for basic things like housing and food became more crucial. I think more obvious how important it is for our societies, and I think putting these questions again in the center. Also, André Torre, I think I saw André Torre doing some recent work about the re-territorialization of food production, coming to some logic of proximity. And of course, tourism, I think, can reinforce this proximity because food is something that can be also a tool to differentiate a tourism destination, to show something different, etc. In terms of demand, in fact, it was not too different from what we saw in the previous work with Peter Nacken. It was, in that case, it was all type of regions, very touristic regions, not touristic at all, south, north, very developed, not so developed. And the results were kind of similar. So basically, the impacts of demand in itself were not too strong. The impact of the value added of tourism was always very positive. And the impact of let's say, labor-intensive services was in general negative. So probably tends to be the the low cost tourism with the low salaries, and that thing that we tend to reproduce in our models of development. That then, when we compare with more developed regions, we observe better the difference. So in that sense, it was somehow similar to what we observed in the sectors. I cannot say much more than many options can work. We don't have to say that the sector A and B are the good ones and that C and D are the bad ones, because it's visible that regions can have good results with different types of combinations. And honestly speaking, the model doesn't capture how this transmission is made. And that's something that Vinco can work on that in the near future.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else?
I will ask a question. Hello, hey. How are you doing? Thank you. I had some engineers fixing the air condition in my office just finished, so everything working well. And so, from speaking from the perspective of Croatia, the country with the highest share of tourism-generated GDP in European Union, this is quite a pessimistic overview that you have given. So what kind of, I don't know, lessons or maybe some suggestions on how to redirect our trajectories would you be able to give us with all the insights that you have from your studies? I know it's a hard question, but it's the question of all questions for us.
Okay. Well, I have to say something. No? Okay. So I would say also from my maybe I don't know exactly if Portugal is much less dependent on tourism. Eventually, yes, but surely the region where my university is located, Algarve, it's also very much dependent on tourism. So it's a problem that I'm familiar to, and well, we are already in this planet for a few decades, and we see that we are coming. We had a crisis in 2008, 2009 with a huge impact in these regions, very depending on tourism because demand stopped, because of economic problems. Now we have another huge, even bigger crisis because of this pandemic thing. And the regions that are very much depending on tourism are extremely vulnerable to all these impacts, whatever is economic, health, whatever. These regions are extremely exposed. So I would say that finding a bit more balanced regional economic structures, focusing on what people need. People need houses, people need transports, people need food. If these things are organized, there is no crisis that can be so much difficult to deal with. And I would say that basically that sometimes there was a bit the discussion we had a lot of, this is my idea for the chapter if I have time to write it. Because the book that Ante and Lydia invited me to make a contribution was about over-tourism, protection of natural resources in over-tourism. And it's a bit strange to speak about over-tourism now that all the tourism is blocked. But for me, the problem is, so to say, the same. Over-tourism and under-tourism are only a problem if tourism is too much important in an economy. If tourism is not so much important, for sure there is no over-tourism. And also if tourism stops, also the impact is not so big because they have other things to do. But when tourism reaches a too big importance, then both over-tourism is a problem, under-tourism is a problem. And these cycles are becoming a bit too much regular and too much strong for the regions living on tourism. And in that sense, it's a very powerful industry. We see I follow a bit, there is a professor very active in tourism studies, Bouchalis, a Greek professor from Bournemouth University. He's very active in so. And he shares everything. And he was mentioning the meetings between the German government and all the governments in South Europe to make a big pressure to reopen as soon as possible, because they have Lufthansa and TUI, the biggest tour operator in the world, one of the largest air travel companies in the world, and they need to put this thing to move. And of course, the South European countries need the income again. So it's a very powerful game in which the regions of the south of Europe are very much dependent and very vulnerable. So I would say reducing a bit the dependence on tourism would be something very good. How this can be done, that's another. But in general terms, I would say that reducing a bit the dependence on tourism seems important at this moment.
So getting all the eggs out of that basket into other baskets as the
I think so. That's
yeah.
How to do it is another. How to do it is another thing.
We've had a big lesson now. Hopefully, we will learn. But
yeah.
we'll see.
Let's see.
We'll see. Thank you, Joao.
Thank you for inviting me for this session.
Always.
Time no see.
Okay. Any more questions?
If I may, one again, very practical one. Actually, as you are living in Japan, and to all of us, Japan is something like another planet. I don't know. So you're much familiar to it. So since Japanese tourists are very often seen here in the Middle Dalmatia, especially in Split, what can we expect after this pandemic? Will the Japanese market recover very soon, or we can expect, to see them far in the future?
I think that they are very, very slow to open their behaviors. I think they are very preventive, and that's good for me living here, I would say. As far as I understand, for example, the city or the region where I'm living is Hiroshima, so it has 3 million persons. There is no case for, I think, already more than 1 month, no positive case. So they reopened the universities last week. I came back to classroom, but still it's full of rules. We go in the transports, we go in the streets, everybody wears masks, everybody keeps the distance, even with more than 1 month without cases. So they are, and apparently they are now, they will soon, I mean, maybe I think next month, eventually they will start to open borders with some countries where the situation seems to be extremely controlled, like Australia, New Zealand. So this kind of bilateral opening with countries where the situation also seems very much under control. But it will be slow, I think. It will be slow. They, for example, even for the Olympic Games, because it's a big issue here in Japan. It was a big investment in Tokyo, and of course, it's a national project. They took a lot of time until accepting that they could not make the Olympic Games. But even now after accepting, they already consider the possibility of not doing next year also. So they are extremely
difficult to prognose.
Difficult to prognose, and they are very careful here. They really don't take this. For me, that I'm a bit more accustomed to this society, much more. For me, what I see in Europe next week, opening the international tourism between UK, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Germany, everybody moving again. For me, this is crazy.
We are not scared.
No, but the question is that here there was all these countries in Asia had the impact of this virus 2 months before Europe. So Europe had 2 months
later,
to learn what happened here, to prepare a plan, emergency plan. If it comes to Europe, what should we do? And nobody did anything. It came to Italy. Only after being in Italy, then people start, maybe this is coming to us. And then we had a second round. In Japan, the things looked controlled, in Singapore, in Korea. And then a second round came, and bigger than the first. Not too big, but bigger than the first. And now what we are calling now controlled here is the second wave.
Yeah.
And this is controlled because they were very strict. Each time one person is infected, they immediately identified, you spoke with this, you spoke with that, everybody in quarantine. So there is a very strong mechanism to isolate the clusters of infection. Yeah. And this is based on national health systems. How can you do that? With international travels, it's impossible to keep track. A person comes from Germany, gets an infection in Spain, then goes back to Germany. It's impossible to do this kind of follow-up. And I don't know if there is a second wave coming or not, but if it comes with this open system, it will be very difficult, I think.
Very difficult, definitely. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Lydia. Any more questions? Okay, maybe I have one question regarding your empirical strategy. To be more precise, I will ask the question regarding the resilience indicator. Could you please explain motivation for using this kind of indicators? I have several ideas or papers that I was related to this topic of resilience. So if you can
well, I tried also to look at concrete indicators, and I see lots of people speaking about, but then it's difficult to find concrete. So here, so that concept, shock absorption, recovery, I'm trying to find the slides where I had these kind of things. I'm a bit tired already. It's 10 p.m. Here. But let me try to find where was the names. Self-restoration, shock absorption, vulnerability. So what I tried is let's say, compare one. So the variable is employment as a measure of the impact on the society. So that's the first step. Which variable can be used, or maybe several. In this case, I use employment because I thought it was a good measure of how it impacts the society. And then basically what I do is I compare the average in a certain period with the average in another period. So one period minus the other. And then I make a regression on that difference. It's not too complicated. I would say it's even a relatively simple method. So basically, for the self-restoration, employment, the average of employment between 2014 and 17 minus the average employment 2007, 2008. So that difference, what explains that difference? What contributes to explain that difference? Then the shock absorption, the employment in 2014, 2017, minus the average employment during the crisis. So just this, it's relatively simple. So in the first case, it measures the difference between now and the period before the crisis, so to say. And the second case measures the difference between now and the crisis. So how much the regions changed a little or very much, and what explains that. So basically was relatively simple, and I think reasonably effective in the sense of giving some outputs. But of course, I'm also very open to get suggestions for a more sophisticated way of measuring. But I'm a bit, this is also, let's say, Roberto Patuelli was somewhere there. I think he's much more sophisticated econometrist than me. If I do the model is simple. So I'm not a sophisticated mathematician. But sometimes we are using very complex models, but going too far from something that can be somehow interpreted or give some. In this case, maybe it's the contrary. Maybe I can get some results, but maybe it's too simple eventually. Maybe Roberto is a good guy to develop a bit more sophisticated indicators. This one is effective in that sense. It's relatively simple to understand what is there, and it gave results. And it's very open to be developed in different directions. So that's the point. But it's not too much sophisticated indicator, in fact. But if I look at these works of Martin, etc., conceptually they are very good. I think I can get good ideas. But then, in terms of how to measure.
Then we have a problem.
Then we have a problem.
I agree completely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, any more questions?
I was looking if my wife is here to introduce to you.
Okay.
She's not.
Yeah.
She's not. She's probably sleeping already or something.
Okay. Please prepare. Okay. So.
Okay.
No more questions for Joao? You're so kind. Okay. Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Considering that it's already 10 p.m. in Japan, I will say just thank you, Joao, for outstanding presentation on your time. Again, these exceptional webinars require more than just a great presentation. They need valuable content and importantly, engaged viewers. And we have it all today, like always. So thank you, Joao. Thank you for all participants. And hopefully we will see each other in Split or in Japan. Until then, good luck and
we're looking for the good news.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Now it's at any moment. It was the last information. It's at any moment it can happen.
Okay. Good luck. Good luck and see you soon, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Bye-bye. Good luck.
Let you know.
Thank you.
Best regards. Thank you.